Few things are for sure in this life, but this is. If we live for any substantial amount of time, we will encounter grief due to the loss of a loved one. Not something any of us ever want, and we all handle it differently. This podcast is to feature those who have done purposeful and meaningful things through their grief. These people featured on here are normal folks, just like you and me, who were thrust into a place they never wanted to be in their lives. A painful place. As they move through their pain, they realize that something worthwhile, something for the greater good could come out of the unthinkable. I'm sure that none of them would ever consider themselves to be a hero, but when I searched the definition of the word hero, I found this: a person who is admired or idolized for courage, outstanding achievements, or noble qualities. And that fit. And so it's my privilege to bring you the remarkable stories of these heroes in grief. Hi, everyone. This is Tom, your host for the Heroes in Grief podcast, and the response has been incredible so far, and I want to thank you for that. It's getting out to people, and they're letting us know that it's helping them, and that is what it's all about. I want to make you aware of a way that you can support this podcast without having to spend 1 cent, and that is through affiliate marketing. I've set up affiliate marketing for online shopping. If you do online shopping, then I have links to all the major retailers, most of them anyways, and I can provide them for you so that when you buy online through those links, you'll help support the podcast through the percentages that we get. It doesn't cost you anything more. You just shop like you regularly would on the sites that you love. It's very easy. All you have to do is shop. And that's it. Just let me know the links to the places that you want to shop at, and I will provide the affiliate links so that you can do it. If you want more information on this, you can go to heroesandgrief.com. It takes you to the Linktree page where a video explains it in a little more detail. But you can always email me at tom@heroesandgrief.com, and I can answer questions for you. But you can support the podcast that way, and it's very easy, very simple, and it doesn't cost you a cent. Isn't that great? Thank you. Now here's today's episode. How's everything? I didn't suspect any problems, you being a podcaster.
Hopefully not, even though you know how it is, like being on the other side is it's different, it's a little intimidating sometimes.
Well, you just totally relax. This is casual conversation, and it's all about you. So you get to talk about yourself.
I was listening to your episode where you share your story, and I was like, oh my gosh, yes to that, yes to that, yes to that. I was like, I hope we get to talk about all these wonderful things, especially like the spirituality part was awesome. I totally resonate with so many of your messages and your beliefs about it.
Wow, that's great. Now, I see, I don't know those things when people come on and everything. So we're rolling already, just so you know. We just go right ahead. Yeah. Folks, thanks for joining us on Heroes in Grief today. I've got Nina Rodriguez with me, and Nina does a podcast as well, the Grief and Light podcast. So you can look up already if you want to while you're listening. Look up Grief and Light. And is it under griefandlight.com, Nina, or not?
Correct.
It is?
griefandlight.com and at Grief and Light on social media all across the board.
Yep. Just spell it right out like it said, Grief and Light. So look it up and definitely give her stuff a listen. Go subscribe and everything. Get on all that stuff. All right. So we'll kick it right off with that. So everybody can just do that. Hi, Nina. Well, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. I'm excited to be here with you today and to have this opportunity to share about our story and our lives and everything we do in the grief space.
Yeah,
I say we because I feel like, we're in the space together. I know you're part of the Get Griefy collective, and it feels like a we thing sometimes whenever I get to share with a kindred spirit.
Yeah, I think so, and definitely feel a brother sisterhood with everybody in it because of that. The unfortunate part of it is that we got connected, but the good part is that we're moving forward with some great things. So that's exciting.
It's that both and.
Yeah, that's part of your whole thing, right? Yeah, excuse me. All right. So Nina, as you mentioned a little bit, you're checking out my story and everything already. And I love how this all happens. In my last podcast that I recorded, actually, because I'm recording a bunch here, it was another one about sibling loss. And so it seems that these themes kind of thread through. I don't know if that happens with you on your podcast,
Definitely.
but out of nowhere. And I think it's meant to be because there's messages we need to get out there more readily, however way you want to put it. And certainly sibling loss is one of those. But we'd love to hear your story, Nina, and because the stories always resonate with people in different ways. And so love to hear your story and what you've done with everything to move forward.
Sure. So, let's start in 2019. So, pre-pandemic, pre-life that we know today of
Mhm.
essentially how the world changed in the last 5 years for everybody. But for us, it started September 11, 2019. That's the day my brother passed. We celebrated his second birthday, September 10th, and I got the call the day after, 2 or 3 hours after I had FaceTimed him. And it was
Hmm.
there was nothing out of the ordinary. So I just didn't think anything of it. It was just one of those things where life is, what you know it to be 1 second, you blink and everything has been flipped upside down the next second. It was one of those things. And for context, my brother's name is, I still talk about him in the present tense. It's a
Yep.
personal choice. I believe
Me
that
too.
I practice continuing bonds and I believe that we are still connected. It just looks very different now. So I'm doing it intentionally. If, the listeners hear me talking about him like he's still here. So Joseph was 3 years younger and he is my only sibling. He It was his birthday, like I said. It was a normal, I believe it was a Wednesday, middle of the week. And I was working in real estate back then, closing a deal, 7 o'clock late night. And something nudges me. It's one of those little kind of something pulled at my heartstrings. And I was like, gosh, it's his birthday. I wish I could just at least give him a hug, like go check him out and give him a hug, wish him happy birthday. So I talked to my husband and I was like, do you mind if we just drive up there today? I'm so sorry. And the drive is an hour north. So 7 o'clock at night, you're getting off of work to go drive an hour north just so I could give my brother a hug, right? Thankfully, my husband was like, yeah, sure, why not? Let's go. And I was like, cool. So we get there and I call my parents. I'm like, hey, do you guys want to meet at the house and like just sing him happy birthday? So we did. And it turned out to be really nice, very unplanned. He didn't have plans that day. We had plans for the weekend. We were supposed to go to a comedy club. And so that Wednesday, there was really nothing. We got to sing happy birthday. He, shared funny stories. My mom shared a story about when he was born, like the day that he was born. I have it all on video. The last thing he ever said was, thank you, mom. Thank you, dad. Thank you, uncle. My uncle was there too. Thank you to my husband. And everybody just hugged. And it was like, oh, that was nice. Cool. I'm glad we did that. Didn't think anything of it. Come back home. The next day, he was supposed to doggy sit my uncle's 17-year-old dachshund, who was like very old, like could
Yeah.
barely walk. So my brother FaceTimes me and he's walking over there. It's around 6 o'clock. I mentioned that because I see that glow, the golden hour glow on his face. And the thought that goes through my mind is he looks so angelic, right? And that's not a word I used to, that's not a common word that I use or anything like that. I was like, oh, that was weird. Who said that?
Right.
Anyway, I keep
Mhm.
talking to him. It was just like a very beautiful glow on his face. And he's like, yeah, I'm so scared to take care of this dog because it might die. He's so old. Like, I just don't want anything to happen to him under my care. And he was on his way to my grandmother's house to meet my uncle to pick up the dog. So I said, don't worry, you'll be fine. My brother was amazing with animals. I call him like an animal whisperer. He was very sensitive to a fault. He loved anything that had life in it, like plants, people, pets, like everything. And if that's why my uncle entrusted him with the dog, because he was just such a careful, thoughtful soul person at the time. And he goes to my grandma's house, calls me, or I can't remember if he called or texted to tell me he's there. And I was like, okay, cool. 8 o'clock rolls around and my husband and then comes from home from work and he's telling me about this guy at work that's like asking him, how are you doing today, and how are you doing today? He's like, dude, I just saw you yesterday, why do you keep asking me how am I doing today? And I say, I bet you anything, if you sit down with that person went through some sort of life experience that he learned not to assume yesterday and today are going to be the same thing. So I'm literally having this conversation. The phone rings and it's my father. And my father and I had this agreement that if something was going to be wrong, he was going to ask me, are you sitting down? And the reason for this is because my brother struggled with addiction, with self-medicating for many, many years. So there was always that hypervigilance and that sense of being on guard anytime there was a phone call. Did something happen? Is he okay? Are you okay? What is happening now? So in order to not associate every phone call with a family member with a complete panic and, oh my gosh, do we need to kick into rescue mode? I said to him, unless you tell me, are you sitting down? I'm not going to worry. I'm just going to assume you're just calling to say hello. So that day he says, "Are you sitting down?" In that moment, I completely forgot about that agreement. I'm like, "Yeah, why? What's going on?" And then he tells me what happened. He just said it very like bluntly. And I said, "What the F is wrong with you?" And I don't talk to my dad like that, but it was like my knee-jerk reaction. I was like, "What the F is wrong with you? Why would you ever say that?" He said, "This happened. Come home. I need you to come home. I'm with your mom. Like, hurry up." And so the life changed after that. It was again an hour drive north. There was this big full moon, and I blamed the moon. My brain was trying to make sense of everything. I said, "This the full moon did it because it makes people go crazy. It like has the power to raise tides in the planet. Like, I'm sure it had something to do with it." So for many years, I was actually like very upset at the moon. Anyway, all this to say, September 2019 is the moment that changed everything. Not that this needs to be qualified, but there is something with sibling grief where we feel like we have to explain our level of closeness with this person. And so I want to insert a caveat that even if you were estranged and you lost a sibling while you were estranged, there is so much grief there and your grief is very valid. In my case, we were very close. When he was born, it was like my privilege and honor to be his sister my whole life. I was his keeper, if you will. So there was a soul level bond with him that I cannot explain to people. And a lot of people said, you're too care about him too much. And I was like, I don't even know what that means. So I'm just going to let that go and check it up till you don't understand and let us do our thing. But he came with me almost everywhere and we were just very close. I felt responsible for a lot of his joy and his peace. And he confided in me quite a bit. So when I lost him, it was extremely disorienting, obviously. And I immediately assumed people would understand what I was going through because, gosh, you lose somebody. That's so sad.
Yeah.
Not only did I get the weirdest comments from people and coworkers and my former boss and like all these people, but it was completely dismissed. It was completely ignored. It was completely like, "Oh, well, you have to be strong for your parents and, you have to have a kid now so your parents can focus on something else."
Ugh.
And he suffered from addiction. So, aren't you glad you don't have to worry about him anymore? And now you can relax. And all these comments that I was just
Oh
like,
my gosh, I'm so sorry.
I'm sure you understand, unfortunately.
Ugh.
And I can laugh about it now, but it was shattering back then. And everybody asked about my parents, understandably so. Nobody asked about me. It was like my grief didn't even exist. And it was like, "Well, what are you doing to help your parents?" And I was like, "What? I'm trying to like go through my own day. I don't know left from right now. I don't know up from down right now."
Yeah.
So that confusion, I made this a little bit longer because I want people to like understand that moment. It is so incredibly confusing. It goes from everything to the future is not what it used to be is one of my favorite quotes. And you're tossed into this new paradigm in life. You expect some empathy and basic level, entry level empathy and compassion. You find the opposite. When you are navigating this by yourself, like I was looking for, books, groups, stuff in the internet, anything that could help me. And what I found was so limited. As somebody told me back a few years ago, there's more literature on pet loss than there is on sibling loss, especially adult sibling loss. Because what I did find was usually, people in their later stages of life who lost a sibling, and of course they're worthy and need grief support as well. Everybody does. Or very young, like, children who lost a sibling or whose sibling, was stillborn or something like that. Nothing for my age group and nothing on addiction, something related to, and I say addiction, but it was fentanyl poisoning. And we say poisoning because there is no safe amount of illicit fentanyl, even 1 to 2, what is it?
Grams, I think. Is it
Yes.
grams? Yeah.
Something tiny, like 2 little grains of salt, the equivalent of 2 little grains of salt can kill you. So anybody distributing this substance knows that there's a potential to take somebody's life. And that's why it's called a poisoning. Also because we don't know, most people take whatever substance they meant to take, not knowing it's laced with fentanyl. So there's a lot of nuance here with the way that somebody passes, whether it's an overdose whether it's fentanyl, and even if it was quote unquote intentional, because that's the assumption, this person did that intentionally and oh well, they knew this could have been a consequence. I guarantee you, the person, somebody who is going to my grandmother's house, let's say, I'll speak for my brothers, to doggy sit this dog whose main concern was, I'm so worried that this dog is so old and something's going to happen to him while I'm taking care of him, did not do this intentionally. But even if somebody took a substance intentionally, I guarantee you they did not think they were going to die.
Yeah.
And that's very important to highlight. So let me know if you'd like me to pause anywhere here.
I just want to, I want to go through some things because these things keep happening, all these parallels, all these synchronicities. And so they're not direct, but as soon as you said Wednesday, my son, Jeff, passed on a Wednesday. I'm trying to think because it was the night he went up, on a Wednesday night upstairs and took something. And then I found him on Thursday. So Wednesday, that connection. You're the older sister, you're 3 years, but Jeff's sister is 2 years from him. The connection with pets. Jeff was a gentle giant and so connected with our dogs and our little granddaughter, 4 years old, and he'd talk in his little kid voice. Jeff was 6'1" and 250, and he would be like, "Oh, hi, Evelette," a little voice, and that kind of thing. So that, the fentanyl, of course, yes, we could go down a whole rabbit hole on the fentanyl and drug situation. I have not yet got the coroner's report. He did call me and say it was fentanyl poisoning. I don't know, because I know that some of these people who are doing drugs are taking actual fentanyl. And so I don't know if that was just that or he was taking something else and it had it in there. I probably should find that out because this keeps kind of coming up. So I want to find that out. But yes, there's so much that you can get into about all of that people dispute or they want to argue about or whatever the case is. I have my firm beliefs about drugs in general nowadays. I did drugs when I was younger, plenty of them, but they're nothing like they are now. And the only people who died from overdoses in those days are people who took too much of the drug and died. Not now where they're being poisoned with fentanyl. So it's different. And yes, did they take a choice or did they have a choice to do what they did? They did. But, the same thing too. No way, because it did come up at one time. Do you think he may have done this intentionally? And I was like, no way would he want me to find him up there or us to find him up there at all. He lived with us and no way. I mean, and it was a simple, like I said, that was a Wednesday night. We had Chinese food, like we normally do. Judy and I went to watch a movie up in the bedroom. We heard him go upstairs and I found him in the morning, so it just made no sense to me either. And the same type of thing, just normal activities. But those who have done drugs for a long time know that they do that. They can function, they're functional in what they do. And they may just figure, well, it's another time and I've handled it all these times. Jeff knew. We talked about it. Said you're playing Russian roulette, and he knew that. I believe that the drugs change their minds nowadays, and they really have no control in some sense. So go ahead and argue with me on that all you want. I don't care. But a lot of these things interesting. So horrible though, like you said, and I'm glad you really got into describing the torment, the horror of that time, because there's just no words to describe where you go when that happens. You're just teleported into oblivion pretty much and trying to grab for whatever you can to find some kind of stability. And so that brings up all the other things, of course. But I just wanted to, because as I'm listening to you, some of these things are coming through, and I like when those things happen. The memories of all them are painful, of course, but it's neat I think that there's connections and we're connected through them who are now across the veil. And so I think it's kind of neat how some of those things come through sometimes.
It is. And, I feel the same when I was listening to your story, and I'm very sorry for the loss of Jeff. It's very painful, all the elements surrounding it and how you found him and everything. That the human part of us will always ache in that area.
Thank you.
And also I was like, they would have been friends. Like
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
a gentle giant. When you spoke about Jeff knowing about quantum physics or mechanics, so did
Hmm.
my brother. He was one of those like, did you know about this? Did you know, like, fun fact guys who just knew. My brother just knew these quote unquote like random things, and he taught me about, like, I know about tardigrades, for goodness sakes, which is like a microscopic creature that can survive in outer space because of my brother. Like little things that had just such a curious mind. Loved being out in nature. And I always said, if I ever needed to be in like a survivor show, like I would definitely take my brother, because he knows how to do the outdoor survival kind of camp and lifestyle, and was just very attuned to his intuition in many ways. And also, I believe every side has a shadow side. And so when you have a very sensitive person, and there's gray areas with their sensitivity. They're very trusting of people. They're too trusting of people, in my opinion, sometimes. They give people the benefit of the doubt a little too much. And it's always like seeing the best side in everybody to a fault. And, I don't want to go too deep into that. It's just my opinion of why he fell into so many pitfalls. He could see anybody and just see just the goodness in them, even if that person to somebody else might be like a red flag, like a walking red
Hmm.
flag. So I just want to highlight that. And I say that because I don't want to just put these episodes out and say, oh, my brother died from fentanyl, and that's all anybody ever knows about him. He was a
Hmm.
full person. The end was that. That wasn't even his drug of choice. So, when I was the one to first read the report, and it was fentanyl and carfentanil. I never even knew that existed. To me, in my opinion, I may not have the actual proof or answer to this, but I know he didn't know that was in there. There were too many substances mixed in one thing. He had been sober for 18 months. This is the best he had ever been. He was making plans. I think he had a moment of weakness because of his birthday. Maybe somebody from his past called him. We don't have any of these answers. We don't know what happened. We live with the questions. The information that we found with the reports, with the timelines, with what we know of where he was in that point in time, I know that, this was 99.9% unintentional. Like I can say that because I don't
Hmm.
like absolutes. I don't like saying something when I don't have all the information, but and it just changed everything. As, following that, the pandemic happened, and gosh, did that change everybody's reality.
Hmm.
So while it was a welcomed pause, I couldn't, I felt like I couldn't catch my breath. And I was like, I wish the world would just stop. And then, okay, here comes the
It
pandemic and
did.
the world stopped. I was like, oh my, that's not quite what I meant, but okay. And that was a great time for us to go inward. And I'm saying this very lightly, understanding that a lot of people, it was the worst time in their life. So I'm not saying the pandemic was a good thing. I'm saying that for us, it was a time where we got to stay home. And in a way, it's what I needed at that time.
Yeah.
So it's a this and that. And my heart goes out to anybody who suffered losses during that time.
Hello, friends. I just wanted to take a brief break here in the podcast to make you aware of a very exciting partnership that Heroes in Grief has just formed, and that is with Get Griefy Magazine. I'm going to let their founder and editor-in-chief, Kara Sanchez, tell you all about it.
Hey, Heroes in Grief listeners. Life after loss isn't easy, but it can be colorful and full of possibilities. Meet Get Griefy Magazine, a vibrant resource filled with inspiring stories of life after loss, expert advice, and voices from everyday grievers and thought leaders. Together, they're here to help guide you toward the side of life that's left to be lived fully and authentically. Dive into Get Griefy for free on issue or snag a print copy on Amazon. Connect with us on Instagram at Get Griefy Magazine or visit getgriefymagazine.com to explore, join our thriving small business collective, or discover advertising opportunities. Let's embrace life after loss, boldly and together.
And now back to our episode.
And I started realizing at the time I said I was working in real estate, I started realizing like I cannot connect with this work anymore. There's something else calling me. My curiosity led me to the world of grief. What is this thing that I'm feeling? What are all these emotions? I have no name for them. Does anybody else feel this? Am I losing my mind? Am I going crazy? Am I going to be okay? And as I started looking into those answers, I realized not only is this normal, but it's very normal. A lot of other people are experiencing this. There are words for it. There are support systems that are kind of sprouting all over the place. And if you can't find your particular answer, maybe you're supposed to be the one creating the space for that answer to, to help people like you. So you're supposed to become the change that you want to see, to be a little bit of a cliche here, but I decided to embrace that. And the idea of a podcast came coming to mind because I said, who else is talking about this? Where are these people? I know there's more people. Where are they? So my podcast initially was like my Batman signal to the world to see who would answer the call. And also an exploration of my own grief. I needed to hear myself. Some people keep it very quiet to the heart and close to their, to their chest. My mom is that way. She doesn't like talking. I've invited her on the podcast. She said nope. And my dad is a little bit more vocal. He has been on my podcast and I created a podcast for this. So whatever range, wherever you are on the spectrum of expression is completely fine. But for me, it was important to hear myself saying these things and to hear other people saying these things. So I launched the podcast very imperfectly, just, hey, who's out there? And in less than, I would say, 2 months, I had people asking me to be on the podcast and I want to share my story and I want to share my story. And I realized this is so much bigger. This is a sign of our times. Podcasts like yours and other people in the grief space are filling a need that was amplified after 2020, because people were connecting in their experiences of loss and grief and collective grief, not just individually. And gosh, it's so needed now. It's such an important space to fill.
Yeah, and there's room for all of us. Just had Heather Taylor on. I don't know if you know Heather,
She's
but
wonderful, yes.
yeah, we were talking about that too. And, someone's going to resonate with you that won't resonate with me, and that's fine, and we all support that. And that's the easiest and greatest part of some of this, is that this is not a competition thing whatsoever. It's just all of us being, in our portion of getting that out there, like you said, for those in need. And certainly helps me all the time. And I love these things that come up. Does it hurt? It hurts. It does, because, I process after I talk to somebody and go through some of the things we talked about, or I'm going through the editing and I relive it again, and it brings up things each time differently. And so that's good though, because I don't want to get lost in this either, where you can be doing this so much and not really dealing with what you need to deal with. So I like that. It brings me back to that place. It was a caution. Judy said to me when we started, she goes, is that going to be something, is it going to bring that back for you all the time and everything? And I said, it may, I really didn't know at that time what I was doing, when you're in that oblivion, and it does, but it's in a good way, I think, for me anyways. So I like it. I like that we can talk about these things and it brings up that at different times, and so many things too. You talked about with sibling loss, and yeah, I've heard that before, where they're talking to the parents or asking you about the parents instead of you, and how painful that is, that you're not being witnessed, and that's what you talked about, speaking it too and getting it out there. Your grief needs to be witnessed, and it needs to be validated. And so that helps that for sure.
And one point on sibling loss. So my experience was I never blamed my brother for anything about I've yet to feel angry at him. I never felt angry at him. I know how hard he fought to be here. I know he loved life. That's the ironic part. So there was no part of me that was resentful. When I did find sibling groups, I was very surprised to meet people who said, I hate my sibling. They did this to me and my family. They did this on purpose. And there was such anger, which is very valid. I don't want to discredit that. But it was shocking to my system because I said, what? How could you blame them? It's one of those, Dr. Gabor Mate, he says, don't ask why the addiction, ask why the pain. They were self-medicating. They were self-soothing, if you will, in the best way they knew how. They wanted their pain to stop. It's not against you. It's something that they were trying their best to find answers for themselves. So when I realized people grieve differently, I said, okay, there is something here that I'm missing. So I decided to become grief informed and learn about the different ways people grieve. And I signed up for Megan Devine's course. She's the author of It's Okay That You're Not Okay. And I gain tools and language and perspective on the different ways that people can grieve and why. And I started to be more objective about my own grief and the way that I extend grace to other people in their loss. I said, just because I experienced it this way doesn't mean other people do the same.
Mhm.
So once I did that, I started holding groups, and in becoming a group facilitator or coaching one-on-one, I learned that I have to essentially remove myself from the equation, just become this vessel for somebody else to process their experience. And to your point about kind of repeating the story over and over again, there's evidence that, especially in early grief, if you have an empathetic witness and you have the ability to share it, it helps you process it. It helps you integrate it in the long run. A lot of the people that are quote unquote stuck years later tend to be people who were never witnessed and who didn't have the opportunity to share their story. Or when they did, somebody said, "Oh, but think about the positive side. They wouldn't want you to be sad." And they were immediately capped from that full expression of their loss that wants to be expressed. So if
Great
anybody needed
points.
validation, please, by all means, share your
Yeah.
story.
When you mentioned about that person blaming the other person, the first thing that came to my mind, and I certainly don't want this to come across wrong, but the first thing I thought of was that there's something internally there in that person doing the blaming that they may need to process. That's the first thing that came to my mind, and I don't know how you feel about that, but that's what I thought, that they can have resolution of that, I think. What do
Absolutely.
you
I think so. I'm not a therapist, just disclaimer,
know? Me
so that
neither.
I don't diagnose people. This is not medical anything. So all those disclaimers. But I do know that it's when we're in grief, everything gets knotted. It's like a necklace that gets tangled, and you just have to slowly start picking it apart and, make it align again. And there's a lot, especially if you had a contentious relationship with your sibling, if you had rivalry issues or
Yeah.
jealousy issues or abuse. There's, siblings that are abusive to each other. And so there's more to it than just the loss. And it takes some time to untangle all of that and make it
I think
clear.
that, yeah, there could be some validity to it, I guess. Yeah, there could be, depending on the circumstances.
It depends.
Yeah,
Usually the
yeah.
answer.
A lot to work through always.
Part of this
Yeah.
human assignment we got.
Yeah, yeah. And one thing I know for sure is that I might not have even taken that second evaluation of it in the past. So it's changed me to be more empathetic in that way toward whoever. And I'm glad for that. It makes you a better person in that way, for sure.
Loss can soften us or it could harden us. And it's up to you to, decide which way you want to go and what meaning you want to give to your life afterwards. So I agree. To me, it has softened me. I to the point that I'm so aware that life is so nuanced and it's so gray that I rarely go to the extremes anymore, if ever. And I give people so much grace to the point that sometimes people critique me like, "Oh, well, you're not taking a stance." And I'm like, "Well, stance on what exactly?"
Mhm.
This person I'm catching a person in this season of their life. This doesn't define their entirety. So why would I define this person in my mind as a calcified thing when I'm literally meeting them in their fall season or their winter season? So it's just cracked me open in that regard and allowed me to extend so much grace to other people. And believe it or not, I struggle in extending that grace to myself more than anything. But it's a work in progress as well.
Yeah, I think that comes, you talked a little bit about the spiritual connections and that we share some of those things. And I think that for me, what happens is when very simply, I mean, I just try to be in the moment. And, that's a catchphrase or whatever. But really, if I'm driving Uber or whatever, or I drive for a charter company here, if I have someone in the car, then I just try to be in that moment with them and sharing our humanity together and whatever that may be at that time. It could take on many different forms. Could be simple, like they don't want to talk and I'm driving them and just being a positive aspect for them in that regard. But whatever that can be, I want that to be, and I don't worry about all the peripheral things either at
That's
all.
beautiful. Yeah.
Sure. It's pretty freeing too, because you talked about how we get this sentiment in us too. But there's another part of me that is like, I don't, and you're part of Resilient, the book Resilient F, right? And I would assume that's as fuck, right? So it's the same thing with me where I'm like, I don't give a fuck about so much of this stuff. I watch the news and I see what's going on and I have my views on things, but that really doesn't matter to me anymore because, I believe in so much more containment of who and what we are and where we're going. And so I just don't have that anymore, and that's pretty freeing in itself.
Truly. Truly.
Yeah. Where are you located, Nina?
I'm located in Miami, so we're both on the East Coast.
We're coming down to
All the way
Miami
south.
this year.
Yes.
We're coming down for the Bills game, Bills and Dolphins game.
Nice. When is that? My husband would know this, but
November, maybe? Yeah,
that's
I
a
think it's
great time
November.
to be here. Yeah. Wonderful.
Early November. So yeah, we have some friends that we watch all the games with, a couple, and they decided they wanted to go down, and I guess Paulie, his family has some people down there, but we're going to get a house, and just have
Nice.
several friends down there and go to the games. So
Nice. And where
maybe we'll hook up
in
down
South
there.
Florida? Absolutely.
Yeah. Can
That's
show us
going
some
to
of
be
the
South
ropes.
Florida, or that's going to be Northern Florida?
It's against Miami, so it's right down there.
In Miami. Okay.
Yeah.
Amazing. Pardon my ignorance on this. My husband would be eye rolling at me right now. Like, how do you not know where that game is going to be? But yes, I would absolutely love to meet. It would be an honor. And that's part of this, you mentioned the Resilient AF book. So that was an anthology of, similar to our conversations. It's people who shared their stories of loss and post-traumatic growth and resilience. And one really cool thing that has happened from all of this is I've actually met some of the people that I've connected with online in person. And it is, like this, like we're meeting technically for the first time, but it's almost like we know each other's story, a lot of each other's stories. And there's a connection that is very unexplainable. So when I got to meet a lot of the griefy crew in New York, it was very special. And it's beautiful, the connections that come out of this. Not to say that, like we wouldn't all blink and have our people back in a second. And also, we're so grateful to have these connections.
Mm-hmm. Was that the second book, the second anthology of that?
That was the third one. Yeah.
Wow.
So it's volume 2, but it's the third book. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, I just was asked to be part of one as well. It's called Stories of Friends and Family Lost.
By
so that just was released May 17th. Yeah, I never expected to ever do anything like that. That's for sure. But I don't have the physical copies yet. I've got to still get mine, but waiting on those. But yeah, it's crazy what happened.
And stories is how we heal. It is, to me. I was thinking about this the other day. Since the beginning of humanity, we've sat around campfires. We get through this thing called life through stories. It's how we share wisdom through generations and how we share our humanity. And so this is our 2025 version of it, like podcasts and these anthologies and the blogs and Substacks and all these things we're all creating. And I think that there's so much power in that. And we're just tapping into this, like you talked about earlier, this thread that has run through thousands of years in our humanity. I think that's beautiful. And somebody will read your story. And like you said, I'm a firm believer that Tom and I could say the exact same thing and it will resonate differently to different people. And also the repetition of it will reinforce that there's a normalcy in this conversation. There is so much power in that. There's so much power.
Yeah, that's why there's so much room for all of us in this grief space, if you want to call it that everybody can get their story out there and everyone can do what we do because of that, someone's going to resonate more with that person than somebody else. And that matters. There's something for everybody.
Definitely. And I love it. I think it's filling a space that people are craving. People are craving connection, and we lead busy lives, and we don't always have the time to go to meetings or meet in person and all these things. So the podcast aspect of it helps fill that void because somebody could listen to this episode in their car or on their way to pick up their kids or in the morning or while running or jogging or whatever. And it helped me that way. I know you're part of Helping Parents Heal. I don't know if you're familiar with Brian D. Smith of the Grief to Growth podcast. So I think he's like one of the, I don't know. I know he's part of Helping Parents Heal. But his podcast was the one that helped unlock a lot of this life after, I say life after life instead of life after loss, but life after life conversation for me and normalize a lot of these terms. And the podcast aspect of it is the first thing I found to help me feel seen and heard. And they weren't even talking to me. So it's not a conversation I had with somebody. It's a conversation I listened to. And this person unlocked the whole like near death studies aspect of it, the conversations about mediumship, which prior to this experience were not on my radar. Like this was not a thing I talked about ever. So when your mind and your heart are looking for answers and they're like, my question was, where did you go? I still have your shirt and your hat and they smell like you. And you were just here. So I FaceTime you. My call log says, listen, 24 hours ago, I FaceTimed you. And the cup that you were drinking is still there, still has like liquid in it. Where did you go? And so that to me, that question lingered and in a way still does, but like not as much as before, lingered for at least, I would say 3.5 years. And in those 3.5 years, the only thing that gave me, I wouldn't even say an answer because it's not that, but just some kind of peace in my heart was stories about near-death experiences.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care. At the time, I was like, is this real? I need to look at the science. I need to look at the facts. Me today knows to just lean into an experience without having to have all the answers. I don't care if it's real or not. That's not even the point. To me, it's that experience that thousands of people, I don't know if millions, but like definitely thousands of people have experienced. They have a thread that runs through them and there's consistency in their stories and they don't know each other. They come from different parts of the world. And those stories gave me hope and those stories gave me peace more than any written scripture did. And I chose to lean on that. It's not to say, this is my new Bible, this is my new religion, not even. It's just cracking the door open to possibility. And if that possibility gives you peace and it makes you feel connected, then why not?
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for saying that, because people hear me on here all the time. If they've listened for any period of time, they know where I stand on this. So I started with near-death experiences when my mom passed 2 years before Jeff. And I was already doing the same thing. What are the scientists saying? What are the doctors saying? Anyways, I believe in all of that. And it's very clear for people who ever listen. But I think that the important aspect is that each individual is where they are. And wherever you are listening out there right now, watching, you're where you are, and that's fine. And just open up yourself to the possibilities. That's all I say. Not unlike, recruitment and religions or whatever, that's not part of this at all. And it's what I found with helping parents heal was that it had a hope aspect because of that. There's hope, and that's evident in there. So it brings a different dynamic to the whole situation that might not be present somewhere else. So, that's all we can say. We're just people, right? We're just ourselves. And I love how you brought up that, that wasn't part of your life. You did not, that wasn't you. And so something occurred that has caused you to change your views on that. Some kind of evidences for you personally that have happened. And so, that's all we can say. That's all we can tell people, and be honest about it. You talked about there's hundreds of thousands of stories out there now, and the internet has brought them all together and able to be out there. And yes, that's one thing, even as I get enveloped in them and I start my own doubt about things at times, I say, now, wait a minute. What would be the motivation for these hundreds of thousands of people to do this? I don't see that there would be any motivation in that to do that, and then when you look at the similarities and all these different things, it starts pulling it back together. But our humanness is always going to battle that. There's no way around that. So, but anyways,
it's okay to have a healthy level of skepticism. I think that's okay. It's part of us asking questions. If I may, I want to, share this experience because I just had a full circle moment. Yesterday, I went to jury duty, and that is related because in 2020, I got summoned for jury duty right after my brother's passing. And it was the first outing that I had at post grief that had nothing to do with my regular routine. So in a weird way is welcomed. I showed up to the courthouse. I'm, in that big waiting room with all these hundreds of people. And I decide to go on YouTube, and this NDE story by Dr. Eben Alexander pops up, and it has all these views. I'm like, who is this guy? So he was I don't remember if he's a neurosurgeon or
neuroscience. Yeah.
Neuroscientist, right?
Yeah. Neurosurgeon.
And he experienced a near-death story that he documents beautifully. If you've heard of it, it's Dr. Eben Alexander's story. And he put his entire career on the line because he understands that this experience, as he described it, was more real than real. So he understood that there is something here that it's really hard to explain and translate to our human experience, but there is something here and people need to know about it. So that one in particular, simply because the skeptical mind is like, well, anybody can come up with these stories. How do you know? But this person literally put his entire life and career on reputation on the line because he had this experience that he wants to share. That opened the door to so many other experiences. And I said, wow, then the IANS, International Association for Near-Death Studies, and there's a bunch of people studying this. And some would argue that there's plenty of evidence. There's things that, people experience throughout their NDEs that can be validated in real life when they sort of come back. So yeah, whether, again, to me, it's less important. The science of it, to me, it's more important. What are the things that make you feel connected? Are those signs? I experienced a lot of signs. I experienced dreams with my brother. I recorded the dreams in my notes section, and I have, over the past 6 years, I have over 200 of them. And if you record them, I did an episode about the dreams with Dr. Joshua Black, who studies grief dreams, bereavement dreams. And he says there is an exercise you could do to increase your dream recall, because some people say, well, I would like to dream about my person, but I can't. So there are many different factors, but essentially writing them down every single night or whenever they happen is a way to increase the recall. There's also traumatic dreams. So if somebody, let's say, keeps having nightmares, recurring nightmares, there's ways to decrease the recall of those particular dreams. So there's this, life after life, if you will, that area has opened up a lot of studies, and it has opened up a lot of conversations of possibility. Much of it, in my opinion, is still somewhat uncharted. It's just beginning to bloom. But there's an openness that wasn't there before. I think social media and YouTube play a huge role in that amplification. And more people are saying, there is something here. My go-to phrase is, if it makes you pause, if it makes you feel connection, if it brings you joy, then don't question it. Just go with it. Lean into that.
I personally think there's a movement happening, a spiritual movement with all of this. That's just my personal side. I don't want to miss talking about some of the other things that you do, Nina, and we got a few minutes. You do one-on-ones and other things too. So what else is available for folks through you?
So my main thing right now is helping people in one-on-one and groups, and obviously the podcast. I'm starting to realize I prefer groups. I love the group dynamic. One person unlocks something else for somebody else. I do not believe, as a grief guide, I have all the answers for people. I'm merely the facilitator for the space. So I'm focusing on creating specific opportunities, particularly, for sibling loss, but I do hold more generic ones once a month. You can find that on the website at griefandlight.com. And I'm also doing a lot of speaking engagements, whether they're virtual or in person. I recently did one on sibling loss with Reimagine, and we had a panel of people who had lost a sibling. And we were told afterwards it received the highest amount of registrations, which was surprising to people because that's one of the topics that people focus on the least. So it confirmed that there is a need for this space to talk about sibling loss, and we're looking to fill that space. And I say we, not because I'm working with any one person in particular, but I think those of us who have lost a sibling are realizing this and are creating more opportunities for these conversations in these groups. So speaking engagements, the groups, I occasionally do the one-on-ones. I'm always looking to collaborate with people. I'm very collaborative in spirit. So if you have, an initiative that you like to work on, if you are looking to raise awareness about grief, whether it's in the workplace, whether it's in a community event, whether it's in private events usually it's, I do mostly women's group, but I know men are starting to do their own groups as well. I'm more than happy to collaborate in that regard. And then writing has been calling my name a lot. I started my Substack, and I would like to say that eventually it'll be a book, but I have to get over my imposter syndrome of the book part. But in any case, it's focusing on educating, on creating spaces for people to come together in their grief and joy, because usually there's a lot more laughing and smiles than there are tears, although tears are very welcome. And lastly, I have my online community, which is a dedicated space where people can access, grief support 24/7. And that's something that I offer for free at this time, because it's just, sometimes you're up in the middle of the night, can't quite schedule a one-on-one, can't quite join a group at 3 o'clock in the morning. So you have that space to be able to access on demand.
What's the platform you do that through?
That one is done through Mighty Networks at this moment. I may or may not
Okay.
change the platform, but
Yeah, I haven't heard
yeah.
of that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I started a Facebook group after Jeff passed, that as I was searching for something too, and looking for resources, and there was nothing locally here. So I called it UNY, Western New York Network for Grief and the Grieving. And yeah, the influx of people was dramatic. And I think there's 13 or 1400 people on there now, but it's just a safe space, similar. But you said all of that so well. And I thank you for that, because that is exactly where I'm at. I don't do one-on-ones really. I don't feel called to that for whatever reason. And that's great. It's fine. But same thing, my heart to speak, to be there for people in that regard, groups if necessary, whatever. This is all just a platform for that. And to get this out, just feel called and need to do it. That's all. And yeah, you said that very, very well. So thank you. Yeah,
Thank
that's
you as well. I think there's, it sounds like it's a heart-driven mission for you as well. And one area that we, us in the space are moving towards is making this a full-time career. I don't know if that's something that's a wish for you as well, but there is a need. We see it. We're kind of walking this uncharted territory. It's not to say that there weren't grief support options before. It's not that. It's just that it's evolving into something a little bit different in the paradigm in which we operate now. And to that end, a little fun fact, one of the highest interactions with like ChatGPT or AI type of platforms has to do with personal growth and almost like having that digital therapist, if you will. So whether or not you agree with AI, that's not the conversation I'm having. I'm saying more, there is a need for connection and for spaces where people can speak their truth without being corrected, without being told to look at the bright side, without being told to like divert what they really wanted to say. One of the things that happens in the groups is people will start crying because they say, I've been wanting to say that for so long and I couldn't get myself to say it. And in their mind, sorry if you hear some background noise, but in their mind, it sounded a lot scarier. And sometimes it's this very raw, truth with very jagged edges that just comes out like raw. And in their mind, they made it mean that there was something wrong with them. But once they release that into a group of people who are like, me too, I get it, I hear you, it loses the sharpness and it's released, and it creates space for peace and for a calmer nervous system and for that feeling of feeling relaxed after you've been validated. So small acts like that perhaps were very common in, I don't know, before we had technology, when people gathered around in families and circles, that we've lost over time. That's what these spaces are for. It's for us to be able to speak our truth authentically without being corrected. And once we do that, it helps us move forward. It's life-affirming work. I don't think it is sad, because obviously we're talking about sad things, but overall it's joyful. It's how we help each other move forward, and it's life-affirming work. So if there's, a part of you, if you're listening and there's a part of you that feels a little bit like, I don't know if that's for me, my suggestion is try at least one of your choosing in my groups, you are not required to speak. A lot of people just sometimes sit there and watch. That's okay. I find that the next one, they come back and they do speak because they feel a little bit more welcomed and it's demystified. So these spaces to me are sacred, in my opinion. They're powerful and they're much needed.
Yeah. And how fulfilling it is in your place. For me, when it happens, when you talked about that person getting that thing out and realizing that they're not alone in that is so satisfying. And that is a confirmation, an affirmation of what we do and why we're doing it. And so, that's a great aspect of that too, Yeah. Awesome, Nina. Thank you. Anything that we might not have hit on that you'd like to get out there?
I could always talk for hours, but I think this was a good conversation. Mostly, I just want to thank you. Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for this time. Thank you for the kindness with which you approach this conversation. It's not easy. Full disclosure, I don't share as many details in terms of, my brother's passing and all these other topics with everybody, only if I know that the person that I'm speaking with can hold nuance. And that's very important to me. And I'm sure that extends to your audience as well. If any of this resonated, my heart sees you. And we are alone in the details of our grief and the daily parts of our grief. But there's many of us also going through this experience collectively. And so there's parts that can be shared. And in that aspect, we're in this together.
Fantastic, everybody. Nina Rodriguez, look up griefanlight.com and connect with her if this is connected with you. And you will be welcome. That's for sure. Thank you, Nina.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you for listening to the Heroes in Grief podcast. If you'd like access to any of the links that we discussed in today's show, you can find them in the show notes. There's also a link there to support the podcast if you care to. And there is an email link for me there. I'd love to hear from you and your ideas about the show or what you thought about the show. You really can help out this podcast to get to more people if you subscribe, rate, or review it in whichever way your platform provides. Each week, Heroes in Grief is released on Sunday, so look for new episodes there. Thank you again for listening to Heroes in Grief.